Okay, Tav Nun Gimel. Pesach Tav Nun Hagalas Kelim Yud Gimel Seif Yud Gimel. Kli Sheish Bo Talai. If you have a kli, metal kli, and you have a metal patch stuck on. Im Kadam HaTalai Le'Biyata Yisur. If you put the patch before the Yisur, you used it for something Asur Chametz, so then Ein Tzarich Lahasiro. The Talai came first, so whatever was Baleya, got Baleya into the Talai, and nothing's getting too far, you don't have any Ba'en getting stuck inside the Kli, and you can use it like, and then, so that's how you used it. Basically it was a brand new Kli with the Talai, and then came the Isser, and then you used it, so then Kibolo Kach Polto. Nothing changed. You're allowed to use it, you're allowed to kasher it exactly the same way you used it. So since the Talai was there, before the Isser came in contact, now you can kasher it with the Talai, with this patch, and it's not a problem. Okay. And obviously we're talking about a patch that's on the inside of the Kli. If it's on the outside of the Kli, it makes absolutely no difference. It's no worse, no better, no different. It's just an extra piece on the outside. So the issues we're talking about is even if there's a Talai on the inside, a patch on the inside. V'im kadma bliyata isur l'Talai. Let's say you used it first, the Kli, before the patch was there. The Beliya of Isser came into the Kli, and now the patch covers up the pot with the Beliya absorption of the Isser. So now it's going to be harder to clean, because we're afraid that maybe when you do Hagala, let's say, it only goes inside the patch, but doesn't go through the patch enough to pull it out, to pull out all of it. And then when you cook with it something that you want to eat, a little bit can still come out. So then, the only way to do this is tzarich lehasir talai kodem hagala. If it first became Isser, then you put on the patch. You can't do hagala until you take off that patch. Oh, there's another option, because that's just the level of hagala we're talking about. So then, if or since hagala is not good enough, but there is another option, if you want to leave the patch on, you burn it. If you get to a level of libun, then that's good enough. Now obviously we're assuming that you don't have actual pieces of, if there's actual cracks, around the edges of the Talai and v'chule, and you're worried about little pieces of actual chametz, so then there's no way to clean it whatsoever. No, okay. So now, if you're going to have the Talai there, and you're not removing it, in this latter case, so then hagala won't work, it doesn't go through, so you have to burn it. And then that burning does go through. Okay, acharkach magil kol hakli. So you burn the part in the patch. You can burn the whole kli, but it's just easier just to burn that part. And then you do hagala, and hagala works for the rest of the kli. Now, libun kal, libun chamor, which one? So it depends if what the worry is. You're worried about maybe there's actual ba'en, you're worried about just an isser bliya. So, but bottom line, the Mishnah Berurah just says if you do libun kal in this case, since that's the main chashash, is we're afraid maybe there's a drop of ba'en that's there, so then libun kal is enough to get rid of any kind of mamashut, and we're good enough. So he's meko by an eno ben yomo with libun kal. Okay. And he just points out also, if you're going to get these cases are not so common, but if you're going to have a patch, right, we don't usually cook with dishes that need patches, we would just throw them away. But he says if you put on the patch by welding it, so then it would be okay. You wouldn't even have to kosher that part, because the welding itself burnt any kind of chametz. You already did your libun. Probably that was a libun chamor. Okay, haga. No. Where are we? V'imu shel eitz. Now, if your kli is made up of wood, and then you put on a patch, ein lo takana. There's nothing you can do, right? We're talking about if you first had the bliya of isser, and then you put the patch to cover the isser. So then the hagala doesn't go through, and you can't burn it because you'll burn your wood. So then, ein lo takana, ela im ken yarchiv hasedek kol kach sheyuchal lehotzi misham mashe betocho. Unless you start making a huge groove where you can reach in there and the water goes through, and it's not much of a patch anymore. Haga, roshim she'osim umunim b'toch kelim mutar le'agilan mechar shenasem mechadash v'nakrim heitev. Sometimes you buy a new kli and it's got some grooves in there. Just as long as you can clean it well, then you don't have to worry about it. Okay. All right, let's go. Yudalid. This is more practical. Yudalid. Kisui shel barzel shemechasim bo hakderot. The covers of pots. The metal cover of a pot, the lid. Tzarich hagala. So this is from, right, your kalim from during the year, and you use it sometimes for chametz, and therefore you need to do hagala on the lid. Now, we're talking about a pot that has water inside, and so there, your steam is coming up. So you only have to do hagala. We're going to see in the next case where you actually have to do libun. So here we're talking about liquid, so therefore you just have to do hagala. Kevan shemazia b'chol sha'a mechol makdera, since there's constantly steam coming right up from the kedera with the chametz inside, and that's going straight to the pot, and then we're afraid you're going to start cooking with that with kosher, with your kosher chametz stuff. Right? If it's used by mistake, if the lid, you take out the wrong lid and you have a chametz lid, then we're afraid the zeya of your kosher food is going to go up and pull it out, because it's a very small, steamy space. V'im netanu bePesach ala kedera shelo b'hagala. Now, if you did it on Pesach by mistake, it happened. Someone took out the wrong lid, so then, not so common, right? Everything gets locked away, but anyways, if this happened on Pesach, so the kol tavshil is aser. Everything in the tavshil becomes aser, because we say the zeya pulls it from the pot, from the lid, and puts it back into the food, because it's a hot, closed, small, steamy space. So then it's aser, shezeya tekisui mitarev b'tavshil, because the zeya goes up to the lid and pulls it down into the tavshil. Now this is only aser b'diavad on Pesach according to the Shulchan Aruch. If it's a ben yomo. If it be according to the Ramah, it would be ifilo eino ben yomo. Right, we learned? Because the Ramah says even eino ben yomo is tam nifkam, but we're still choshesh on Pesach be'mashehu. Okay? If it would be done before Pesach, so certainly according to the Shulchan Aruch, it would be okay b'diavad. You still have to kasher your kli, but if it was already used for food b'diavad, then on Erev, before Pesach starts, it'd be okay, according to the Shulchan Aruch, and according to the Ramah, if it's in Eino Ben Yomo, before Yantiv, then it would be okay if it's Bishat Adchak. Okay. Mishnah Berurah points out, what happens if you put your lid on just for a second, and then as soon as you put the lid on, you realize, whoa, this is my chametz lid. He says it's okay. Even though it's during Pesach, you put your lid on for a second, and you take it off, it's okay, because in 1 second, you're not going to have zeya going up, heating up the lid, pulling down the taste, and putting it into your food. How many seconds that you have, I don't know, but certainly, I would say 1 or 2 seconds, 100% mutter, according to the Mishnah Berurah. Okay. Ted Vav. Kisui shel barzel shemesimin oto ala chara shenafet ala kira tzarich libun. Now, that case we just had before was if you had a pot with liquid. What happens if you have some kind of a pot or a pan and there's no liquid and you have a cover for it? So this cover sometimes touches the actual bread. So, in this case, since everything is dry heat, and it's not, the issue is not liquid, and we're talking about the lid actually touched the chametz by mistake. That can happen sometimes. So if assuming that's the metzias that we're talking about, then there's no way to clean it and except tzarich libun. Then you actually have to do libun. And Mishnah Berurah points out, and since we're talking about hot, everything is hot. The pot is hot, everything's in the oven. The cover is hot, the bread is hot, and if it's actually touching the bread, then you even need to do libun chamur. Okay. Ted Zayin. Medocha muteret b'hagala. Now, if you have a mortar, right, you're smashing what's where we smash grinding our spices. So the issue is, in those days, they used to also have very spicy spices with breadcrumbs. And that's how they used to also use these mortars. So since that's how it was used, you're with bread, it's all getting smashed in there. It has as a din of a beit seor, of a kli, where you let the leaven rise, strong chametz, and it's rising, it's fermenting. So therefore, we're machmer. It's not just considered clean sonin, it actually has blia. It actually does absorb. Okay, so what do you do? So in such a case, that's the case that the Shulchan Aruch is talking about. Mishnah Berurah points out, nowadays we usually just have our mortars, if we're using the way we use our mortars for grinding our spices, we never put chametz in there. So therefore, lechatchila, it's 100% you just do hagala. Even according to we're going to see the Ramaz Machmer in the case of the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramaz Machmer when there's chametz. But Lamaisa, he says nowadays, it's lechatchila, you can just do hagala, and even if hagala wasn't done, but the food is okay. Because we don't use it for chametz, we don't use it with breadcrumbs. Okay, so let's just read the Shulchan Aruch and Ramah. So in those cases when they used to use it for breadcrumbs, so since it absorbs, the Shulchan Aruch writes, all you have to do is hagala and a kli rishon, no problem. Now, v'imi gedola shen yachol achnisa beyara. This is like in any case where a kli needs hagala, but it's the kli that you need a kasher is too big and it doesn't fit inside the biggest pot that you have for kasher in your dishes. So what do? Nesimim mayim rotchim umachnisim betochan even urtachat ve'ola haraticha b'chol sfata. You pour it in with burning hot water all the way to the top, and you put in a burning stone. And that burning stone keeps the temperature, raises the temperature, and then it makes the water overflow the edges, the rim, all the way around the top, and that's the only way to kasher. And this is the same status as being a kli rishon. Okay. Haga. Alright, you can also just boil the pot. Well, actually, we're not talking about a thing that you boil. If you had the biggest pot, the similar case by the biggest pot that you have, how do you kasher your biggest pot? You put on the stove, you boil it to the very, very top, and then you make it overflow by adding in a burning hot stone. Here there's no fire underneath. It's basically all Iri Kli Rishon with a burning hot stone. And then that brings it into, exactly. So it does raise the temperature a little bit, and therefore it's, or it keeps it. But it makes it boil, keeps it at the boiling temperature, and it makes it overflow. V'yesh machmir labina b'docha. And some say, no, that's not good enough. You have to do at least libun, which libun kal. Ach belibun koldehu the sheisraf alav kashim b'chutzage. But any kind of libun, which means libun kal, which is hot enough that on one side you heat it, and then that same heat is able to go all the way through, because you need a kasher all the way through the pot, and you see that the kash it can burn on the other side. So that's libun kal.
Be very hard stone.
Okay, or you just put it into an oven that's on the level of a libun kal. Okay, for long enough for this mortar to get hot through and through. And the mihu sagi le bagala im ein bo gumot. Okay, so some are machmer that they need to do libun kal, and the minhag is we do libun. But if it's completely smooth, it's okay to do hagala. V'im hamedocha sho'etz, and if it's of wood, yesh hakofo b'kli amanut achashinu nagumot. So if it's wood, because we're afraid of little crevices, you have to like sand it down from the inside. And ulagilo charkach, and then afterwards you do a hagala. Okay. Yud Zayin. Hadaf she'orachim alav kol hashana. If you have a what's a plate? Not exactly a plate, like a cutting board, some kind of a board, and you use that all year for letting your chametz, your challahs rise. Or in your bowl, it's used for kneading the dough. So here you have concentrated chametz, it's actively fermenting, rising challah. So in these type of items, tzrichin hagala, you have to actually do hagala. And yeah, so since you're using it all year for these items, you actually have to use mamish hagala, which is the same as irui with a stone. But and that's the minhag. Mishnah Berurah points out to me, ikar adin, if you only use it once in a while for challah, but usually not, then just irui without even a stone would be enough. But but the general minhag is anything that you use for kneading the dough on it, it needs hagala. Okay. V'lo mahani ba'kiluf b'kli umanut, and it's not enough just because here it's concentrated fermenting chametz, and it's not enough just to do a simple scraping of the top. You actually have to do hagala, so it goes deeper through inside. V'chein kol davar shetzarich hagala, and anything that needs hagala lo mahani le klipa. It's not enough just to scrape the top, because hagala is to go through and through. You have to heat up the whole kli, and it's supposed to go all the way through. The heat's supposed to go all the way through to pull out anything that's all the way through. So just scraping the top surface is, it's good for when cases are needed for just kedei klipa, but when normal cases of hagala, you have to get it through and through. Okay. V'haminhag shelo lishtamish b'Pesach v'arevos v'dapim shalashim behem kol hashana afilu al yedei hagala v'chen yikar. And he just points out that l'maisa, the minhag is anything that you use for baking challahs, for letting it rise, for kneading the dough, right? You have fermenting chametz. We don't use it all year, and it's also very difficult to clean from the cracks, v'chulei, so therefore, we don't use it at all. So the Mishnah Berurah qualifies, and he says, but if it's a smooth metal, like you use a metal bowl or a glass bowl, and you know you can clean, and you know it's smooth and you can clean it, you are allowed to do hagala. Hagala works in that case, but even for metal, you have to do hagala. For this type of beit seor or something that's for fermenting challah, fermenting chametz. But Yesh Machmirin, he does point out there are some who are machmir even with metal, even if it's smooth, not to use anything that's used for making chametz. Okay. Okay. Yud Chet. הנדבק צריך לדקדק בה מאוד לנקותה מפתיתי חמץ הנדבק בה ונסרח ונדבק בנקבי הריגס הנפה ובעץ שבה. וישפשפו אותם במים יפה יפה. Now, a sifter. Can you use the same sifter you use for flour for chametz during the year that you use for your flour for Pesach? So the Shulchan Aruch says, of course you can. Everything is cold. It's just sifting. But it's a sifter. So there's tiny little holes all over the place. So you have to make sure you really, really, really clean it well. Okay, so that's the criteria. It must be cleaned out completely well, scrubbed and cleaned and poked and everything to make sure there's nothing in there, and rub it really well, and then it's okay to use. Haga. However, Rama writes, V'nagu lo lishtamish b'nafa yedei hagala ve'ein l'shana. Oh, I skipped a line, sorry. V'hu adin, back to the Shulchan Aruch. V'hu adin l'chol sha'ar klei halisha. And so too, anything that's part of the lisha process, shashifshuf bahem ikar gadol. So he just points out, anything that's part of the kneading process, it's extremely important to rub it and scrub it really, really well. Okay, to make sure there's no ba'en, no mamashut. That's extremely important. Okay. Haga v'nagu shelo lishtamish benafa al yedei hagala ve'ein l'shanot. The Ramah says, but the minhag is we don't use the same sifter, or if you do, you have to do hagala. It's not enough just to scrub it, even though it is just clean, but we want to make sure that maybe, it got stuck there a little bit, and it sat there a little bit like a chashash of being a beit seor, and ein l'shanot, and this way when you're doing hagala, you do chalita and everything, and you stop the chametz process. So, okay, v'chen kol bayotzei b'zeh, any case like this, kagon nakli shekorin rib, aizin, or akish, or rechaim, or the container, or the pocket sack for mills. V'kulan lo mahani luhu hagala. Hagala alone. So in these cases, hagala itself doesn't work. Oh, sorry, I misread it. The Ramah says not to use it even with hagala. Right. So in case I misread it, not to use, even though hagala could work theoretically, not to use it even with hagala. V'chen salim shemishtamshim v'hem chametz dinam kenafa. So to bread baskets where you have crumbs, so then also we don't, because of the crevices, we don't use them. We just put them away for Pesach and don't use them at all. However, for the following case, he's a little mekel by hagala. What do you do? Asakim yeshanim noagim be'em hetra yidei kibus v'tzarich lahatir kol tefilot shebehem kodem hakibus. If you have these sacks that they used to put in flour or bread, and so there's crumbs in there, so for these cloth sacks, if you really want, you undo all the stitching, and then scrape out any of the crumbs that you can, and then it's clean, and then you put it in kibus. You launder it in your with hot water and soap, and then you can use it. Not very practical. So according to the Shulchan Aruch, the Ikar Din is you do a very thorough cleaning, and according to the Ramah, you can't use it at all.
Do you know what a Kashering is?
Not exactly. Some kind of a container, or sack. I don't know. Some kind of a container. I don't know. I don't know what material. Okay. Yutet. Haracha chekorin fala yeshomim she'en moyo la hagala v'tzarich liknot chadasha. Okay. Now this is a giant spatula or a shovel, something that you use for putting the bread or pizza inside and out of the oven. So you have this giant spatula for putting food in and out, maybe for pancakes. So he says, some right, it doesn't help to do hagala because it's on the fire with dry heat. And so therefore he says the best thing to do is just to buy a brand new one. Now this is more of a chumrah because really it's only in the fire for seconds. You're not cooking with it in the fire. It's not like a spit where it's sitting in the fire and the spit itself is becoming burning hot with the chametz. In that case, you need libun chamor. This case, mi'ikar adin, if you just did hagala, for example, it would work b'di'evid to kasher it because we're talking about just a few seconds, right? Or your utensil that you use for a barbecue grill. It's talking about, so, l'chadchila, we don't use it if it's on the fire unless you do libun chamor, but b'di'evid, with hagala, it would be fine if it was used by mistake. Okay. And if it was used, I believe the case is even without hagala. Well, he says like this. That's after Hagala, it'd be mutter. After Hagala. So let's say it was used. So let's say it was used by mistake. So if the shovel or spatula was completely, if it wasn't completely clean from chametz and you used it, so then you would have to cut off kedei netila from your food, which is about 2 centimeters, part of the thumb. The middle of the end of the thumb, that's the thickness that you have to cut off. And if it was completely clean, a completely clean spatula or some kind of a tool that you use for cooking on the barbecue, and you used it, so then you only have to remove kedei klipa, because it was all clean. And okay, I'm not sure that might even be even without hagala. This case of removing kedei netila and klipa. Okay. Anyways, usually. Bottom line though, we use new spatulas and new cutlery for the grill. Kaf. Oh no, I think we'll stop.
The Yomi that